Now, one of the interesting things you did to challenge some of this thinking is to get a bunch of people together, some interesting people. Tell us a little bit about this renegade brigade of yours.
Well, in the summer of 2008, we brought about 35 of the top management thinkers around the world together, people like Henry Mintzberg, Peter Singhi, C.K. Prahalad, Tom Malone, and others, as well as some CEOs from some pretty progressive companies like Google and Whole Foods and some others. But the question we really were asking was, what is management's moonshot? And, you know, if you think about it, I think often there's almost kind of this lack of adventure, lack of excitement, ambition among management thinkers and among practitioners. We kind of assume that however good a particular set of companies is managing right now, and that varies from year, you know, was GE a while ago, maybe it's Google now, maybe it'll be something next year, but the assumption is as good as those companies are managing, that's about as good as it's ever going to get. And, you know, what really struck me in kind of the genesis of this little project was when I moved from London back to California a few years back, I got to meet people. I live close to Stanford. I got to meet people from the engineering school, from computer sciences, and medical school. And a lot of these, you know, academic folks, they also saw themselves as inventors. They were inventing new therapies, new materials, new algorithms, but they had almost kind of this romantic sense of like, why can't we solve these big, complicated, interesting problems? And yet it seemed to me that within the discipline of management, and certainly within business schools, we'd basically become glorified journalists. I mean, we were going out there, finding a few interesting companies, writing up some stories, saying, go thou and do likewise. But we weren't really looking beyond best practice and asking, how could it be? So the goal of bringing these 35 people together, we basically asked them, what is going to have to change in the way we manage if we want our organizations to be fundamentally more adaptable, so you don't have to go through some kind of valley of the shadow of death experience to kind of retool and re-vector as an organization? What do we have to do if we want organizations where innovation is truly a core competence, where everyone every day is engaged in that work? And finally, what do we have to do if we want people to be present at work, not only physically, but we want them to be present emotionally as well? And there was a logic behind why we picked kind of those three big things of adaptability, innovation, and engagement. But the real debate over a couple of days was, okay, if we really want to make fundamental progress there, what has to change? And out of that came kind of 25 management moonshots, we call them, but you know, problems that I hope will energize and inspire people for the next decade or two.
You mentioned engagement, which is a very big subject, I think, with management all over the world. Were there any specific thoughts or ideas that came out of that meeting with regard to engagement?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are some things in every organization we're going to have to get much better at if we want to engage people. Number one is dramatically reducing the level of fear in organizations. Number two, depoliticizing decision-making so people don't feel that decisions are basically a function of political power and access, but really a function of good ideas. Creating a democracy of information where you have kind of complete transparency across the organization. People don't hold information. They don't use it as a political weapon. You know, reducing kind of the power of the traditional hierarchy. All kinds of things, I think, if we're going to unleash you know, real human potential in our organizations. I mean, the kind of very sad thing, in fact, I would say it's more than sad. If you're a manager or a leader, it's actually scandalous, is that despite the last 30, 40 years where we've talked about empowerment and engagement, we no longer call employees employees, we call them team members, associates, and so on. Despite all of that, if you look at the data on employee engagement from around the world, virtually in no country are more than about 20% of employees truly engaged in their work by their own kind of admission. And so you think about that as a manager and say that means that basically about 80% of people, or 80% of their time, they're there physically and that's it.
And that's a lot of potential.
Oh, I mean, you know, here we are, you know, fighting through a recession, worrying about how do you take the next 3 or 4% of costs out. I mean, by far the greatest untapped source of wealth and potential in any organization is all those people who've chosen on that particular day not to bring their imagination to work, not to bring their passion to work, not to bring their initiative to work. And the irony is in the economy we live in today, which is not anymore a knowledge economy. Knowledge is kind of a commodity. We're now in a creative economy. And in that world, the capabilities that we need most out of our employees, their imagination, initiative, and so on, are exactly the capabilities that are most difficult to command. You cannot tell somebody to like show initiative or to be creative, or you can tell them, but it's not going to do much good. Those are things that literally are gifts that people choose to bring to work every day or they don't. And the moment you acknowledge those two things, you acknowledge, first of all, that the capabilities that count most today are gifts, and secondly, they cannot be commanded. That by itself kind of, turns management upside down, because as a manager, the problem today is not how do I get people to serve the organization. The problem is how do I create the work environment, the sense of purpose and mission that will elicit, that literally merits the gifts of creativity and passion and so on. And so, it's an enormous issue, I would say, particularly for Western companies. Either we join the race to the bottom and, we're all, everything goes offshore and, I don't know, one day we're all employing Chinese prisoners or something. Or we have to figure out how to get people to bring these capabilities to work every day. And that's going to require, I think, a fundamental change in the way managers see their roles, in their behaviors and so on.